Hey everybody, it's Mr. Kemple, and even though it's been a little while since the last video I made concerning this project, we are now going to talk about how to actually construct your toy. Okay? Before we talked about how to come up with ideas for toys and what to do as far as sketching and the conceptual side of it, and then drawing your turnaround art, which I have here. You might remember this from earlier. So this is kind of the concept I'm going with here, this whole Batman thing from the old TV show, the 60s TV show. There was a really goofy episode where Batman and Joker are having a surfing contest, and it's a really infamous episode because it's just so ridiculous and goofy, and they were really kind of playing up the whole camp element. And so Batman is on a surfboard, and he's actually got swim trunks on over his costume, and he's surfing in full costume, but he's got swim trunks on over. It's really silly. But I was just thinking in terms of like what would make a good, fun kind of a toy design. That just sprung to my mind. And I kind of just did it as a one-off sort of goofy idea. But then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, yeah, that might actually work. So this is kind of what I'm going with here. So I've done my final turnaround art, which is what I'm going to base the toy off of. So I've got the toy drawn from several different angles, the front, the side, and the back. Everything kind of lines up. And then I'm going to kind of base my toy around this artwork. So you definitely want to have it handy and have some good reference handy as you're working. All right, so I've also got photos and stuff from the show that I can use as well for reference if I need to, because when you're dealing with something realistic, like dealing with real people, even if you're playing with proportions like I am here, you still want to kind of make it look like, the whoever it is you're trying to sculpt. So this doesn't need to look exactly like Adam West from the show, the actor, but there's certain details that I definitely want to make sure that I'm including as I do this, just to show that it's the TV version from the 1960s and not something else from another cartoon or comic or something. There's so many different styles and treatments for Batman. There's like an endless amount of variations you could do on whichever Batman. So that's kind of the neat thing about it too. So I'm going to have this kind of off to the side. I'll be looking at it and referring to it as I go. I might make some slight changes on the final toy from this, but it's pretty much going to help me see what I need to do and match it up. And again, I'm dealing more with what's called a chibi, Japanese, or sometimes it's called super deformed, a style where it's like the kind of the big head, little body sort of style. I think that will work well as a children's toy. So that's what I'm going. That's why the proportions of this are not realistic, because I'm doing something purposely stylized. And actually, I might even exaggerate the style even more on the final version. I might make the body even a little bit smaller now that I'm looking at it. So again, I drew this a while ago. Been kind of a gap between the last time I did this assignment with my classes and now. So I'm still going to go with this idea, but I might make some slight changes as I go. All right, so having said that, I'm going to show you the materials that we're going to be using for this assignment. All right, there's several different things. So first of all, what you're going to need is a container, kind of like this, something preferably with a lid on it. Now this is just like a, you know, like a takeout container, fast food container that I had laying around. Odds are you probably have something similar at your house. I just kind of took it and rinsed it off. It's a good size, so I can kind of keep all my loose pieces and parts in here as I go. Put my lid on, and it's, if I need to transport it somewhere, or, you know, if I need to clear the table off and whatever, having the lid's very handy for that. So some kind of container like this you will definitely need. Maybe not quite this large, but something similar. So it could also be a, you know, a round container, you know, something like this that you see a lot of times in takeout food. Just, you know, something around this size, you know, with a lid, whatever. All right, so first thing you need is a container. Second thing you'll need, which I will give you, is some polymer clay. Now this is called Super Sculpey. It's a special kind of clay that cures in the oven. So you basically take this and bake it in your oven at home. It doesn't have to be a super high temperature, but basically you can cut this, mold it, shape it however you want. It cuts pretty easily. You might need to, if it's been sitting around a little while, you might need to shape it a little bit with your hands and kind of soften it up. If for some reason you can't get it to soften, sorry, I'm over here doing a ASMR type thing over here with all the crinkling. So yeah, as you can see, this cuts pretty easily. Just get a knife, or you can even peel it apart with your hands and just, you know, slice a chunk of it off. It's beige colored. Once it bakes, you'll be able to paint it and sand it, whatever you need to do. All right, but as you can see, just, you know, with a little bit of action with your fingers, you kind of get it kneaded, and it'll soften up a little bit in your hand. If for some reason, again, it doesn't, if it's like really hard, there's some of this stuff here called Sculpey clay softener, and you just put like literally like a drop or two in this. Let me open this up here. Now I ordered some of this for the class, so you'll have it, but this is kind of my own stuff that I have at home. So if your clay is a little soft, or if you're working with it and you have like a lot of bumps and fingerprints and stuff that you want to smooth out, you literally just, let me see if I can, yep, put like one little drop on there is all you need, and just start working it into the Sculpey. And it will start to immediately soften. If you use too much, it gets really greasy and oily. You don't want that. But just a little bit. See, this is already a lot softer now, just from having put one drop of that in there. So, handy to have. I have a variety of sculpting tools here as well that you can use for shaping things and adding in details. So, I'll have an assortment of that available as well for the class. The other thing that you'll want to have is some aluminum foil or some wire. And this is to create something called an armature for your figure. Basically, think of an armature as like a skeleton almost, so that when you're sculpting, you have a frame to kind of build around. One thing you don't want to do when you're building a toy or sculpting something with Sculpey is have something that's too heavy, especially if you have a toy and you have moving parts, or it needs to perform some function. The lighter it is, the better. So if you make something out of solid Sculpey, that can get pretty dense, and it will get heavy and bulky. So if you can first make an armature out of something like foil or wire, actually that will make the inside much more lightweight. So when you're doing an armature, the first thing you'd want to probably think about doing is think of it like a stick figure, right? You know how like when you're doing a figure drawing and you're starting off with a stick figure and then fleshing it out, kind of like how we did in Art 1. You're kind of starting off with that stick figure form. This is sort of a similar thing. Sculptors do this a lot, where basically you have a piece of wire, and you're just gonna start looking at the proportions, thinking about the proportions of your toy, and start to build a little stick figure based on those proportions. And then I'm going to kind of twist this wire a little bit here, like so. And twisting it will kind of give it a little more stability. Like that. And if you want these to be the legs, you kind of just keep twisting until you get something. Now see, this is a bigger head because I'm, again, doing the whole chibi style. And even that might be a little on the big side. So you can kind of keep twisting this wire and bending it over on itself if you feel like you need to change the proportions, or you can clip it as needed. Okay? So you got to watch your size on these toys, all right? You don't want to make something too big, right? Think about Happy Meal toys. If you look at my previous video, I show you all kinds of examples of toys, and they're all pretty small. They're like no bigger than this. So see, that's already kind of a little on the big side. So I'm going to definitely want to take this down a little bit. But the idea is, you're going to continue adding to this, maybe get another piece of wire, twist it on, make arms, and you're going to kind of get, a basic kind of a skeletal structure to start building off of. All right. What you can do, some sculptors get like a piece of wood with holes drilled in it or something, or you can get some other kind of, like this. There's another little plastic food container. Like you can literally take this with the wire and poke, a couple holes in it. I've got these little tweezers here. I think I can just poke a hole like so. And let's poke another hole about there. Stick the wire in. Now I kind of have a little base that I can kind of turn and work on my toy with, right? And kind of bend this inward. If you have any extra wire on the bottom, you can snip it off later. It doesn't matter. But see, that gives me kind of a little more stability. You can kind of hold your thing as you sculpt it, which there'll be times when you do want to do that. But if you do that too much, you'll start getting fingerprints all over stuff and maybe covering up some details that you didn't want to cover up, and you have to keep resculpting, and it just kind of becomes this vicious cycle. So, all right, so once you have the wire down, you can also start taking your foil and shaping it and adding it to your armature. And again, if you remember Art 1, we talked about working from general to specific, right? Whenever you draw or paint anything, the first thing you're going to do is map out the basic proportions of something, right? You don't start with the details, that comes later. You get the big shapes down first. You look at the big relationships. Well, sculpting is exactly the same way, folks. You work from the general to the specific. And that's kind of what this is doing. So this is going to be the head. I mean, yes, this is a big head. But again, stylistically, it's a choice I'm making. It's deliberate. I'm going to put some more foil on the body and bulk that up just a bit. And the idea is, eventually, this is going to be covered in sculpting. So I'll tear off a smaller piece of foil here. So it doesn't really matter how this looks right now. Again, you're looking at the proportions, like how big is the body compared to the head. I'm going to add some appendages on here. And you just kind of want the proportions to match the body. So I want to bulk up this head even more. The nice thing about foil is that obviously aluminum foil is meant to be baked, so heat won't bother it. If you were filling this with some other kind of thing, like a plastic ping pong ball or foam or something, it will be a problem if you try to bake it. You'll have to deal with melting or toxic fumes being released, and you don't want that. So foil, using things that are safe to go in the oven, like foil and wire, are always safe bets. So as you can see, I haven't done much with this, but already it's starting to kind of resemble a stylized sort of cutesy figure. The proportions are such, all right? So I'm going to continue to add a little more foil to this and wire, and I'm gonna switch over to I'll finish this up. I don't want to do this whole thing in real time, because it'll take forever and you'll get bored. So basically what I'm going to do now is just continue adding to this. I'm going to This is aluminum wire I'm using, which is nice and soft. So it will cut very easily with wire cutters or even probably scissors. So now I'm going to add some more wire. I'll wrap it around a couple times for the arms. Twist like so. honestly don't need really long arms, so I can probably snip this. Or you could probably just twist it and bend it over. Either way, you don't want to have lots of little bits of wire all over the place. That can be kind of messy. So I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to twist this way. Yeah, that's the right way. I'll go ahead and twist this to the end. And then if this is too long, which this is, I mean, it's really hard to kind of guess how long the pieces need to be. Just kind of bend this over on itself. And that can be your arm. All right, then I'll make the other arm, and I'll kind of try to pose it in a semi-surfer kind of a pose. And then I can start adding some Sculpey on top of this once the proportions are looking good. All right, so I'm going to switch over to time-lapse mode now and keep working on this, and you'll see it start to take shape. But this is like basically what you do. You get tinfoil, you get wire, and you're trying to make like a little stick figure, a little armature for your sculpture, and you want to keep it pretty small. Like, I don't want to really go much bigger than this. All right. And any excess that's down here, you can always snip off later. And you can add more to it as you go. All right, so I'm going to keep adding a little more foil, a little more wire to this, and then the next step will be starting to add Sculpey over top. Okay, so we will continue this in time-lapse mode. Okay, it's not fancy, but it doesn't need to be at this stage, right? Again, this is just sort of a basic framework to start building my figure on, and it's lightweight, which is important. The proportions are about where I want them to be, and it's safe to bake, which is the most important thing. Now, if you are going to, use some other kind of mechanism in your design, for example, I ordered these on Amazon, which are kind of cool. You can buy parts of toys. Like, for example, here is a little wind-up man, little blank template. See, it's like a little mechanism. And you wind it up, and it walks, right? Let's say you were going to do a wind-up toy. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Get back there. Now, obviously, if you were going to do something like this, there's all kinds of delicate mechanisms and parts inside of that you would not ever want to put in an oven because it'll melt. So you can't sculpt directly onto this and then put it in the oven. What you're going to have to do is, again, like use some tin foil, put that over top, sculpt on that, and then before you put it in the oven, make sure you keep it on there, make sure it fits. Then you're going to gently, when you're done sculpting, slide this off, put this over to the side, and then bake this part in the oven. Then when it's all baked and hardened, then you take it out, slide it back on top of this, and then glue it in place, and then you've got your toy. But like if you're using any kind of mechanism or part that is delicate or could break, you're going to want to sculpt it separately and then add it on after it's been baked. I can't emphasize how important that is enough. Now, in my case, I think I might actually do a wind-up toy as well, just to show you how it's done. But for what I'm doing right now in the moment, this I don't have to worry about because this is just going to be, you know, a solid little figure. Now, if you wanted the arms or the head to move, you could also, you could always sculpt the body parts separately and then attach them afterwards, and then you can, move the arms up and down or whatever you want to do. But this is going to be, I think, kind of just a static toy. And I'm going to add another, like the surfboard part of it on separately, okay? So, once you have your armature set up, now you can start adding Sculpey on top of it. So, we talked in Art 1 about additive and subtractive methods of drawing, but there's also additive and subtractive methods of doing something in 3D and sculpting. So we dealt with this somewhat in earlier this year in Art 2 when we were doing the triptych tiles and the other thing we did, the face tiles, the practice tiles we did. So we talked about, when you are adding parts on top, that is additive, and when you're carving and cutting away, that is subtractive. So you want to just, right now, you're adding just a very thin layer of Sculpey over your armature, okay? And trying to get it look uniform. You might have little bits of foil that are sticking out. That's okay. You'll cover that later. But you just want to get your Sculpey, spread it kind of thin, and just keep covering the Sculpey. And then once you have all that covered, your next step will be to start adding details on top, smoothing it out. See right there how soft it is? It left my thumbprint. So you want to be smoothing that stuff out because you don't want it to show up in the final version. But right now it's going to be lumpy and kind of, it's going to look like this pretty much. So don't worry about it yet. I don't care about details at this point, nor should you. Don't worry about the fact that it doesn't look like anything. It's just like this amorphous blob. That's okay. Just try to get the foil covered with Sculpey, and then you can start focusing on the next step, which is fleshing things out and adding some detail. But again, you cannot start this step until the armature itself looks good, meaning that you've got the pose the way you want it, you have the proportions correct for what you're doing. Again, these are not accurate, realistic proportions, but I'm not doing a realistic looking toy, so it doesn't matter. But these proportions match what's on my art, and that's what matters. So I'm looking, you can't see it, my drawing is off to the side here. I'm actually looking at that and trying my best to make this match what's there. So you're just going to keep adding on with your fingers and just kind of pressing it in and smoothing it out. The Sculpey sticks quite nicely to this foil. So I think I'm going to switch to time lapse again and cover the rest of this. Okay, folks, so after not a whole lot of effort, you can see that I've now pretty much got at least a thin layer of Sculpey around my armature. There's some areas where it's a little bit thicker, like here where I wanted to build out his chin, you know, a little bit. It's still kind of lumpy, but that at this stage, that's fine. So I'm still looking at proportions and things. I think I might need to, you know, do a little bit with the back of his head, trying to shape his jaw and his head out a little bit more. But again, I'm not worried about details yet. And the nice thing about having the wire and the foil under here is that I can still kind of bend him. Got a little tearing going on, that's okay. But you know, as needed, I can pose him and bend him to a certain degree if I want to change up the pose a little bit before I start getting too detailed. All right, but now the next step is I want to start, see he kind of, he looks like this weird kind of ghost-like figure. He's got no feet yet. I'll get to that. But now I just want to make sure that I'm starting to build up a little sense of anatomy. I don't need totally realistic anatomy here. But I do want to at least make sure that, like, you know, his shoulders look right. I might start maybe adding a thin strip of Sculpey here around his waist for his belt, just to start indicating where that is. Or I could, you know, even take a sculpting tool and start lightly carving in where I want details to go. You know, like the belt, the cape's going to be about here. Might want to build his shoulders out a little bit more, or you know what I mean? Like, you're just starting to generally mark off, okay, like I'm going to do that kind of Loomis head technique where I find the midpoint there, find where the eyes are going to go, you know, just start marking off basic proportions of things so that as I go to the next stage or two, which is, you know, starting to add more layers of detail, it's easier for me to see where things are going to go. I didn't quite get that midline in the right spot. And again, it's all super fluid at this point, at least it should be. So don't get too locked into details at this point. You've still got flexibility to move things around. Heck, even if you don't like the way this is turning out, you could even just scrap it and start over if you really felt like you needed to, and you wouldn't have lost that much time. Sometimes, you know, it might take a couple false starts before you really start to get the hang of this. But it's okay. All right, but I'm going to keep going with this, and so the next stage now is to start laying details down, figuring out where, you know, like the chest emblem's going to go, where his belt is, where his shorts are, his gloves. His hands are going to probably be very small, so I'm probably just going to get, you know, little bits of Sculpey at some point and just add them to the end here. And then I'm going to get my sculpting tools here and start to really, you know, I might even use a little tiny bit of the softener if I need to, and brush it on with a brush or something and get my sculpting tools and start pretty much like you're drawing onto the surface. Like, but instead of using a pencil, you're using like a sculpting tool, and you're just sort of, you're looking at your reference and you're like, okay, where's this cowl line going to go? And, you know, like you're just sort of drawing out, where do the eyes go? And you're basing it on the artwork and what you know about proportions of the face, right? So you're going in there and you're really starting to give yourself a little template to work with. Ears will go on the side, okay? And this is the stage where you really want to start looking at your toy from, you know, I mean, you've been doing it all along, but you really want to see what it looks like from all sides. You don't want to ever just look at it from one angle, because it might look correct from the front, but then suddenly you turn it to the side and you're like, ooh, you know, like, for example, he needs a nose bad. I mean, that's that's just not right. So when I'm sculpting, I definitely want to make sure I'm, adding a little bit here on the end, because he's got to have that classic, that kind of bat nose sticking out, because it just, the silhouette's got to be right. Obviously, that's too much. So now we're getting into additive stuff, right? So we've been doing subtractive and additive. Now this is more additive. And we're going to be combining both of those techniques here. Okay, so give him a little bit of a nose. That already looks much better from the side. But, your fingers can only get you so far. So what you're going to want to do is, when you get to probably this stage, is when you're going to need to start using some of these tools. Again, I'll have some of them here at school, like as a class set that you guys can use while you're in class. These are made of silicone. They're soft, but and flexible, but you can still get in there and do some nice smoothing with your Sculpey. Kind of move things over, continue doing that kind of a thing. And just keep looking at it from all angles and make sure that, things are looking accurate. It's just like a drawing. You're just making adjustments, all right? You're starting off, you're approximating where things are, but, it's going to be normal for you to have to make adjustments, erase, or in this case, instead of erasing, you're smoothing things out, repositioning, tearing stuff off. I mean, definitely give yourself some grace here, because it's not easy and it's just going to take some time. Okay? But you'll get there. So once again, I'm going to switch over to time-lapse mode, and I'm going to probably be in that mode for quite a while. But again, I'm looking at my reference, I'm looking at other photos that I have, and I'm going to start I'm going for a semi-realistic face, but even then I'm going to keep it kind of cartoony. Same with the proportions here. But I'm going to just start adding lots of little details. His utility belt, his shorts, his cape, more details on the cowl. If I'm noticing any other things that aren't quite right with what I've got already, I'm going to fix those as well. So this is probably going to take, this stage is going to take a little while, which is fine. So just know that that's what I'm doing. So the next time I stop this and look at it, we look at it again, it's probably going to look a lot different than it does now. This is just the base mannequin form. Again, compare it to like when we would do figure drawing and you just kind of have that mannequin with no features on it. It's just the proportions. This is what we have now. Now we've got things kind of covered in Sculpey, and now we're just adding slowly layers of detail. All right, we're just going to keep adding layer upon layer upon layer. It's a gradual process. And then, yeah, we'll check in again, and the next step will be even more layers and smoothing out and trying to get it as smooth as we can. And then once all the sculpting is done, we will actually put it in the oven and harden it. We'll do other things too. We'll do a balance test to make sure he can stand properly and all that. But once we finish sculpting, we'll bake it, smooth it out, we'll bake it, and then we will work on painting it. All right, but for now, this is where we're at, and we're going to move on to more and more details. Okay. Okay, guys, here we are now at the stage of the sculpting process. I don't know if my videos were a little too quick on the time-lapse side, but at this point, I've got the figure mostly sculpted. It's a little bigger than I intended it to be, but you know, it's okay. So what I need to do now is finish. I'm still not done yet, obviously. I've got some more details I need to put in the eyes, in the belt, in the utility belt. And I have this bank that's just part of my collection. And it's got a really good view of the belt. I have photographs of it too, but this is actually a pretty good resource. And I just kind of have this here for some inspiration too. So I need to add like the pouches and the belt buckle and stuff on the belt. I'm going to add a little more detail in the can, in the shark repellent can. And of course, Batman needs ears, his bat ears, like you can see here. So I still got a little ways to go on this. And I also need to smooth out the details. Like I've kind of smoothed out as much as I can with my, with my tools and my fingers, my hands, but I'm gonna probably need to go in at some point with some Sculpey smooth stuff in the bottle. And maybe just take a brush and try to smooth out as much of these fingerprints and little dents and nicks and stuff, because you're never going to get all that out by hand. And again, the more of that you leave in when you go to bake it, it's going to like be permanent. So you want this to be, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it should definitely be as smooth as possible on all areas. So, but these are the details. So this is kind of what I have done so far today. I've added, the hands and the feet, and the legs pretty much, and added some more details, like, gave him a little more musculature. I mean, Batman, the TV Batman's not as ripped as this, but, I just felt like I needed to put it in there. So, again, he's really chunky, right? It's that kind of, again, that chibi Japanese, like super deformed style. So he's got a kind of a, a humorous kind of a style going, very kid friendly, but actually I think it fits in pretty well with the TV show, because that was also a little on the humorous side. So yeah, so now I'm going to continue adding more details and try to get him all finished up, the sculpt. And of course I got to add a cape too. That's the last, I can't forget the cape, because in the show, in the scene, he's like surfing, with his whole outfit, basically, like even his cape, like literally he just puts on a pair of swim trunks over his outfit and goes surfing. I'm going to try to get those details done in this next session here and get things smoothed out, so that all that's left is for me to bake this in the oven. And then once it's done baking and it's all cured and it's nice and solid and hard, then I will take some acrylic paint and paint it up. And then I need to, in a separate other video, I will show you how to, I'll do the painting, but I'll also show you how to make the accessory to this, which will be a surfboard that actually rolls. Like, it'll be like a rolling toy. I had contemplated making this like a bath toy that floats, and he is pretty lightweight, but I don't know if I'm thinking now that this might be too big to balance on a surfboard on water. It would have to be pretty wide. So I think instead I'll just make it a rolling toy. Like when I have some cars with like a pullback motor, like a friction motor, I'll use one of those, and I'll show you in the video how to implement that in case any of you guys want to do something similar in your designs. If you want to, you know, make it wind up and move or roll, or, you know, do some kind of function, I'll show you how you can do that. All right, so anyway, this next part will again be kind of quick. I'll try to slow it down as much as I can in the editing phase so that you don't miss anything, but this is where we're at now, okay? So, you know, this is several hours of sculpting time to get it just to this point, and we're still not quite done yet. But we're getting there. So hopefully in another couple hours, I'll have the sculpt all done and we can bake him. Now, the nice thing about Sculpey is that you can bake it more than once. So like if I wanted to, I could bake this now and have him nice and, you know, solid, so I don't accidentally damage any details and have to retouch it up, because that's already happened to me a few times on this, where I'm holding it in my hand and, you know, I'm touching one part of it and kind of smooshing in the details, and I got to go back and resculpt it. So that's been kind of a, you know, a little bit frustrating. So I could bake this now and then sculpt more on top of that, which I might do, but I'll try to do it this other way first. So anyway, this is where we're at so far. Also, to glue the feet on, you probably couldn't tell in the video, I have some of this Sculpey adhesive. It's like glue, and you can glue either kind of wet, well, I call it, it's not really wet, but it's, you can glue unbaked, uncured Sculpey, or baked, either way. So this glue is really good, and it's safe to go in the oven. So I glued the legs onto the upper body with that, with some wire as support. All right, so I'm going to start the next little bit here, and hopefully the next time you see this and we check in again, the sculpt will be just about finished, barring some smoothing out and touch-ups. Alrighty. All right, folks, we're back a little while later, and as you can see, I've got Batman's ears on. I've got pouches on his belt, got some detail going there. Ears on. Now, what I tried to do here, in at least maybe a cartoony kind of way, is if you'll notice that on the TV show version, his ears are kind of these kind of arrow shapes that attach in a weird way, you know, like, because, you know, it's a man-made stitched cowl, and you can see the kind of seams on his cowl, like that go all the way around. So I tried my best, you know, to simulate those kinds of details where, you know, still isn't as smooth out as I'd like it to be, but I'd say it's probably good enough. Once he's painted, he'll look better. All right, so I've got his cape attached. I attach his ears and try to make them look kind of like the TV show ears. I need to put a little bit of Sculpey inside his eyes so that I can eventually paint, you know, his eyes inside of his, I mean, I guess I could try to make it like the comics and just leave it white, but that might look weird. So I might add a little thin layer of Sculpey inside his eyes, but I can also do that after I bake it. So I might just bake it now as is, because this guy is getting really fragile and a little floppy. Gravity's starting to work against him here a little bit here. He's starting to, it's not really slouching too much, but it's starting to get more tricky. The more I handle this, the more I'm leaving fingerprints and smudges, and I'm, you know, kind of ruining detail, and I'm having to go back over and redo details. So I think for now, I'm just going to bake him as is, and then I'll go back and add some more touch-up details if need be. But this is pretty good for what I need it to be right now. So I also went and took this Sculpey softener and just put like one little drop here and there. And then I use some of these silicone smoothing tools to kind of go in and smooth out some of the bigger creases and areas that needed to be smoothed out. So, and then his cape, I just rolled out a really thin slab of Sculpey and attached his cape. And I have a little wedge of tinfoil underneath there. You can see that I'm going to use. Hopefully it will kind of bake this cape, you know, into this kind of shape, so it sort of looks like the wind is flowing under his cape. This might fail miserably, I don't know, but I'm going to give it a try. Okay, so right now let's take this over to the oven. I'm going to carefully pick this up, take it over to the oven. Now, the instructions for Sculpey basically say that you should bake this in, you know, a ceramic or Corningware dish. So I'm sure most of you have, you know, something like this where it's, you know, like a casserole dish, something that's Corningware that's kind of ceramic. Or you've got, you know, one of these guys here that, not to show you everything that's in my cabinets, but, you know, like a banana bread pan or something, just a small glass or Corningware dish or pan is what you need. Something like that. Hey, look, everybody, it's Camp Rock. You guys remember that, right? Don't ask me why I still have this, but I do. Okay. So I am currently, I've set my oven to 275, and you want to bake this 10 minutes for every like half an inch of thickness. Now you got to think about how thick some parts of this guy are. I'm going to go ahead and stand him upright like that. Now there are parts of him that are not very thick at all in terms of the Sculpey, because again, most of it's tinfoil inside. But then there's other parts, like where his feet are, that are thicker and will take a little longer to heat. Now, you might experience a little bit of like burn marks or something on this. Don't worry about that. You can paint right over that. It doesn't matter. So if your Sculpey burns a little bit, it won't be too bad. Okay? So I'm kind of doing my last minute checks here. You really want to make sure that you're happy with the way your sculpt looks, because if there's anything in here that needs to be tweaked, you can't do much about it after it's baked. Okay? So this oven is preheated. So I'm going to go ahead and put him in now. Be very careful that you don't burn yourself. Kind of goes without saying. Make sure you're using... Yeah, see, I really should have cleaned the kitchen. There's crumbs from dinner on the... I'm bad at this, guys. I'm sorry. You also should make sure... Come on. That the racks in your oven are in the right spot. Okay. So now I'm going to gently, don't fall over, put my Sculpey toy dude in the oven. Oh, I need 2 hands for this. Pardon me, folks. Just give me a second. Okay. Again, please be careful. And do not burn yourself, everybody. Not what we want to happen. Okay. There he is in the oven. Let's close it up. And let's set a timer. Let's do 15 minutes. So don't go too far. Don't leave it in there forever. But we're going to check on him in 15 minutes and see how he is. Now, this isn't like cooking steak or something, right? Like, when you look at Sculpey, you can't immediately tell if it's done or not. So when the time limit's up, we'll take him out and, we will, wait till it cools off. Then we'll do like a little pinch test and see if there's any parts that are still soft. And if there are, that means it needs to bake a little longer. Okay? But don't go away. Don't get distracted. Don't go in the other room and watch TV. Stay close by so that when the time runs out, you can check on it again. All right, so we'll be back in a little bit and see how he baked. Okay, everyone, we're back. And as you can see, our Batman toy is fully baked now. So what that means is if everything looks good and I don't have to add any details or other things, we can start to paint. All right, again, the nice thing about Sculpey is that even if it's dry, if you baked it once, you can still add on soft Sculpey over top and bake it a second time or a third time or whatever, and it won't affect what you've previously done. So I think this is looking pretty good though. The one thing that I'll say that I added to this is if you look at the bottom of his feet, before I baked it, I think I neglected to mention this, I just kind of pushed in a couple of holes while the Sculpey was still soft, and then I baked it, and then I inserted a couple of these little magnets that I ordered from Amazon. They're very strong magnets, and basically he's going to eventually have a little surfboard that he's going to rest on, and I'm still making up my mind if I want it to roll or float, although I originally wanted it to be a bath toy and it was going to float in water, but I'm not sure this will stay balanced, so I might switch it to a rolling toy. But again, that's part of this process, folks. this assignment isn't just about 3D and sculpting and all that. It's about designing stuff and problem solving, all right? Problem solving means you have a plan, and sometimes that plan works and sometimes it doesn't, and you have to adapt and change it up to solve the problem. And you've got to really try to think creatively sometimes to achieve the goal that you want to achieve. So you've got to think about, what can I do to, for example, make sure he stays on a board and he's removable? Or what do I do if something doesn't stay balanced? How do I change that up? So this is all just problem solving, guys. That's a lot of what design is that you've got all these different problems that pop up throughout the course of development, and you just have to run with it and find a way to solve the problem. And if you can't solve a particular problem, that means you need to switch the plan a little bit and change what it is you're doing slightly, okay? And more often than not, when you do that, you're usually changing it for the better. Not always, but most of the time. So he's all sculpted. He's all nice and hard. So even his cape is nice and sturdy now because it's been baked. So now we just want to paint this guy with acrylic paint. So you guys have, your acrylic paints that we have been using. Hopefully you still got yours. If not, we'll have some in the room that you can share. And we're gonna just mix up some colors here on our palette, or you can definitely use a paper plate or something like that, a flat sheet of cardboard. And we're gonna paint this guy with our acrylics, then let it dry. And he'll look a lot better once he's painted. Now I've got about 4 colors I'm working with. It's gonna be kind of like a dark blue, a black, a gray, and a yellow for the belt and his little bat symbol. And, maybe some accents of white for his eyes and a few other areas. But that's pretty much the same 4 colors. So I've got those all represented here. And in this case, this blue is a little too bright, so I'm gonna have to darken it up a little bit to make it match the old 1960s Batman. His costume, was blue and gray, but the blue was very dark, almost like a purpley kind of violet. So we'll try to mix something up to make it match. But yeah, so this is where we're at now. We're getting there. We just need to paint this guy up, make sure he looks really good. Take some time to make sure you've got nice, clean edges, sharp edges where you want them. You don't want to get sloppy with it. There might be like a tricky area here, and I should have thought of this beforehand, but I think I'll be okay. This area under the cape here might be a little tricky to get paint in. So I'm definitely going to have to use one of my smaller brushes and really take my time kind of getting in there and getting that painted. And definitely try to paint the cape first and then go back in and do touch-ups as necessary on like his back and his belt if I accidentally bump it. But that shouldn't be too difficult. All right, so we're painting this next, and then so I'll switch over to our old time lapse once again while I paint this. And then after we get him painted, our final step's going to be building his surfboard and deciding how we're going to pull that off. And then we will have our finished toy. So, all right, switch over to time-lapse mode. But just before I do that, once again, for this stage, for the painting stage, again, make sure, let's review, everything is sculpted, it's smoothed out as much as you can. You want nice, smooth surfaces. And then it's baked so that it's nice and firm. You don't want to be adding any more detail. Like if you still have things to add to this, do that first before you start to paint. All right, painting is kind of like the last stage for this particular type of thing. and then we will work on the board, and that'll be another video. So, all right, make sure you've got your acrylic paints, you've got something to mix your paint on, a palette or a paper plate or something, and that you've got an assortment of brushes. I think flat bristles are probably going to work good for this, you know, when you're applying, you know, on these large or broad areas. You'll also want a couple of really small brushes handy, like this guy, for detailing. Like when I go in and start like doing like his little bat symbol on his chest, or if I'm painting his eyes, I want a really fine brush to get the details in. And also like his little can, his little shark repellent can, I'll probably need a fine brush for that too. Okay, everybody. We are now in the last stage of making this Happy Meal toy. There's my Batman guy, my figure, which you've watched the process of how I made him up till now. But he's still missing his skateboard. Now, it's taken me a little bit of trial and error here. I did buy some foam, like craft foam, and I was gonna cut and make a surfboard out of foam for him to ride on. But the foam turned out to be kind of problematic for a number of reasons. It didn't cut very evenly. It was difficult to work with. It kind of just left all these little bits of foam everywhere, and it just made a big mess, and I just didn't like it. So I kind of took a step back, and remember, part of this assignment is all about problem solving. And I thought about what I really needed, and I got lucky, and I came across these little plastic like pencil cases that are really pretty small and not really, they don't make very good pencil cases, but it's about the right size for, and shape for that matter, for a little surfboard. So I got a cheap pencil case. I cut the lid off, and I think if I paint this, I should be in good shape. And you can see here the way he fits on. That's a pretty good size. So now what I need to do is figure out a way to make him roll. Remember, I was talking about maybe trying to make a floating toy, like a bath toy, but I decided against that for balance issues, so I think it's going to be a rolling toy. So I went to the dollar store, Dollar Tree, and I found some really cheap, like plastic, well, not plastic, they're like little, like kind of Hot Wheels cars. And I think, and I also found this there too, which might work. So I'm going to play around with these. I might be able to take him off and just use the wheels, or I might be able to use the wheels from one of these, stick it underneath the car, the board, and that might give me the rolling action that I need. So again, like, I didn't spend very much money at all on this stuff. I also thought about maybe making a board out of Sculpey, but it's going to be much easier to just use something like this. So anytime you can, as long as the character part of your toy is sculpted, then, it's okay to try to use other things to make the other parts of your toy to make it work. So I'm gonna do a little bit of what's called kit bashing here. I'm gonna take some different parts from other things and I'm gonna try to finish this up. So I am not gonna do the time-lapse thing at this point. I'm just going to kind of do this off camera and I'll come back and show you what my final results are. So again, I'm just using some basic materials here. I've got my craft knife. I've just got some, acrylic paints, brush, some water, some crazy glue, and just my various parts here. So I'll be back in a bit and hopefully this will all work out. All right. Hello, folks. It's me again, outside this time on a lovely day. Here are my two goofy dogs. There's Oreo doing his little hula hoop trick. Can't seem to get it figured out. Oreo and his brother Abe. They're having a good time out here. It's a beautiful spring day. Here's my backyard. So here's what we got here. Now, I tried using some acrylic paint on my pencil case that I talked about before, but it didn't quite work out. In fact, it was a huge disaster. So I decided to, once again, adapt my approach, problem solve, and I'm going to use some spray paint, some yellow spray paint on this. So that should take care of it. I'm also going to spray, if I can get the sprayer to work, a little bit of this crystal clear onto my toy as a way to kind of protect the paint on it and kind of get it sealed in a way so it doesn't get scratched or scuffed. All right, so I'm outside. If you guys decide you're going to spray paint, make sure you do it outdoors, not inside, because there are fumes involved. Make sure it's not a very windy day. It's a little breeze blowing here today, but not too bad. And make sure you've got something underneath to protect it, or that you're not spraying on something nice. In this case, I have a really old deck table that we never use, and it probably needs to be thrown out. So even if I do get a little bit of paint on this, it's not going to be a big deal. All right, so I'm going to shake up my spray paint. This one's a little old, but I think it'll be okay. And then I'm going to spray get it from all sides here. My sprayer's getting a little clogged up. But anyway, I'm going to keep spraying, do a couple coats on the back side, then the front side, and let it dry. I'm going to give it several hours to dry. And then we'll take it to the next step. So I'll see you then. Okay, so I'm at the point now where I've got the pencil case spray painted. As it turns out, the acrylic paint was not working for me at all. So I switched over to spray paint and that works much better, as you can see. So I've got my lid spray painted and I have super glued, crazy glued, gorilla glued, whatever you like, a couple of magnets to the bottom of the lid based on the spacing of the magnets on the feet of my toy, like so. I've also sprayed him, you might be able to tell, I got some crystal clear and sprayed him with some varnish so that the paint wouldn't chip off. So he's looking a little glossier than he was, but it looks pretty good. All right, so now my next step to finish this is to take my little Hot Wheels car I bought. In this case, it was a skateboard. I decided this would be the best fit for what I'm doing. So now I'm going to get some hot glue from the hot glue gun and glue this down here to the center. Give it a little bit to dry, and then I should be able to have a toy that rolls. And then I can put Batman on the surfboard and it'll be like a rolling toy. And the hopefully this lip here on the bottom will serve as a, you know, as kind of a way to cover most of the wheels, so that from above it just looks like he's gliding and you won't see the wheels sticking out too much. So anyway, that's the goal anyway. So I'm gonna go ahead, and I need both hands to do this, so I'm going to cut away again for just a minute while I do this, and then we'll come back and see how it all turned out for the final version. All right, folks, so here it is. Barring a few little touch-ups, this is the final toy. So from underneath, the surfboard isn't much to look at, but you're not really meant to look at it from underneath. But if you flip it over, you can just see that the magnets are on top of the skateboard. They're underneath it at this point. And then I just took some hot glue and just glued it to the underside of the board here. Again, I used spray paint for the yellow because the acrylic paint wouldn't work. I added a little bat symbol onto the board that I just drew on with a Sharpie because it's supposed to have that. So what's happening is that there are magnets now underneath here, lined up with the magnets on his feet. So when I stick him on, he sticks to the board pretty well. And as you can see, I don't want to push him too hard, but he glides quite nicely. And the rim on the side of the board here hides the wheels pretty well. You can still kind of see them poking out a little bit, but for the most part, it's a smooth gliding motion. All right, so now we have surfing Batman, and he balances pretty well on this too. So there we go. Yeah, so you can either display Batman off the board, like next to it, and I guess if you wanted to be creative, you could find some way to prop the board up here. Will this work? Of course it won't work while I'm trying to do it. But anyway, you could try to find a way to display the board upright with him standing there. Or stick him on and push him around, sort of like he's surfing, getting ready to spray a shark with some anti-shark bat spray or whatever. All right, so there we go. I hope this video has been helpful for you guys. Again, it's we had a few little changes in approach that were necessary, but that's normal in any kind of project like this, and that's really the point. This isn't just about the end result, it's about how you get there, and it's about problem solving and sort of having the ability to, adapt your plans and change direction as needed. Artists have to always think on their feet, kind of think outside the box, and sometimes you have to make changes mid-project in order to get the results you want and to solve any unexpected problems that arise. So, and that certainly happened on this one. So anyway, if I'm feeling up to it, I might do one more. I was thinking of doing a wind-up toy, but we'll see how it goes. But at least we have this one. to sort of help guide you as you guys are coming up with your own ideas for your own toys. And yeah, this was fun. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And yeah, all right. Hang 10, Batman.